Thanksgiving had always been a cherished holiday for the Thompson family. They lived in a quiet, secluded farmhouse surrounded by acres of dense woods. This year, it was just Sarah, her husband Mark, their teenage son Tyler, and Sarah's elderly father Harold. The rest of the family couldn't make it due to a sudden snowstorm blanketing the region. The snowfall gave the holiday a serene, postcard-perfect backdrop. The family gathered around the table, the aroma of roasted turkey and freshly baked pies filling the cozy farmhouse. Laughter and stories were shared as the crackling fireplace added warmth to the room. After dinner, Tyler went outside to gather more firewood. He was gone longer than expected, and Sarah began to worry. She stepped outside and called for him, her voice muffled by the thick snow. Eventually, Tyler emerged from the tree line, dragging a hefty log, his cheeks flushed from the cold. "Found some good ones way back there," he said, his breath visible in the icy air. As night fell, the storm intensified, the wind howling like a wounded animal. The family decided to settle in the living room for a movie, trying to ignore the growing storm outside. Halfway through the film, they heard a faint knock on the door. Mark paused the movie. "Who could be out here in this weather?" he muttered. Cautiously, he approached the door, peering through the peephole. A figure, barely visible under layers of snow, stood on the porch. Mark opened the door just a crack. "Can I help you?" The stranger, his face obscured by a hood and scarf, responded with a shaky voice. "My car broke down. I need to use a phone." Mark hesitated, but then remembered the spirit of Thanksgiving, helping those in need. He allowed the man inside, offering him a seat by the fire. The stranger thanked them, his eyes scanning the room with an unsettling intensity. As the man warmed himself, Harold began to cough, a deep, rattling sound. Sarah rushed to fetch his medication, leaving Mark and Tyler alone with their guest. The stranger looked at Tyler and smiled, his teeth unnaturally white against his chapped lips. "You live here all alone?" Tyler exchanged a nervous glance with his dad. "Just us and Grandpa," he replied. The power flickered, then went out, plunging the room into darkness. The wind's howl seemed to grow louder, almost as if it was inside the house. Mark lit a few candles, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows. The stranger remained seated, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Strange night, isn't it?" the man whispered, his voice dripping with something sinister. Harold's coughing grew worse, and Sarah decided they needed to get him to a hospital. But the storm had worsened, burying their car under a thick layer of snow. "You have a car, don't you?" Mark asked the stranger, his voice tinged with desperation. The man smiled again, a predatory grin. "I did, but it's as buried as yours now." Realization dawned on Mark. This man wasn't stranded. He had planned this. Suddenly, the man stood up, towering over them. "You've been such gracious hosts," he sneered, pulling a large hunting knife from his coat. "It's time I return the favor." Tyler screamed, and Mark lunged at the intruder, but the stranger was faster, slashing at Mark's arm. Blood spattered onto the floor as Sarah rushed in, horrified. In the chaos, Harold, frail but determined, picked up the fire poker and swung it at the stranger's head. The man stumbled, momentarily stunned. "Run!" Harold yelled, his voice stronger than it had been in years. The family scrambled through the kitchen, fleeing out the back door into the storm. The snow was knee-deep, slowing their movements as they struggled towards the barn. Once inside, Mark bolted the door. "We need to call for help," Sarah whispered, her breath ragged. Tyler pulled out his phone, but there was no signal, only the relentless wind and the crunch of approaching footsteps. The barn door rattled violently as the stranger attempted to break in. His voice was cold, void of any humanity. "You can't hide from me. I know these woods." Suddenly, they heard more voices, shouts coming from the house. Flashlights pierced the darkness. It was their neighbors, alarmed by the power outage and coming to check on them. The stranger fled into the woods, melting into the night as the neighbors rushed into the barn, helping the family back to the house. The police arrived shortly after, but the man was never found. all that was left were his footprints, leading deep into the forest, disappearing into the endless white. Every Thanksgiving after, the Thompson family made sure to leave a light on outside, never again trusting the dark or the strangers it might bring.